Hello and welcome to Veggie Talks, the show where I talk about all things Veggietales. It's good to be back. Hey, you guys remember the magical year of 2015 when I did that Veggietales month? Yeah, let's not think about that ever again. No, we don't talk about that. Ever. What can I say? I was just starting off. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, and, well, needless to say, I was a very different person back then as I am now, in many different ways. For one, my tastes have changed, and my opinions have changed. So much so that I feel a need to redo not just the first ever list I did of the top 10 Veggietales episodes, but also redo the entire Veggietales month. Somewhat. Basically what we're going to do is remake this video the top 10 video and then make sure that we get some new content in there as well as some other popular Veggietales videos that I made back then that a lot of people like and I'm not too proud of now, and make sure that this whole month is revolved around Veggietales and everyone likes it. That's the plan. So let's get this month started, folks. Here is my new top 10 Veggietales episodes. Before we begin, let's get some things out of the way. Movies will be discounted from the list. As a lot of people have claimed that they're not actual episodes, I myself still consider them episodes, but for the sake of fan opinion, I'm going to make sure they stay off the list. And spoiler alert, neither of them would have made this list. I know, big shock from last time, right? Number 2, this is all just opinion based. I don't care what people think about a certain episode. You can like it, you can hate it. No matter what though, that's not going to change the placement on this list. Number 3, if you've seen my last list of my old top 10 Veggietales episodes, be prepared for very big changes. Little to nothing is the same. So, let's get ready, folks. Time for the top 10 Veggietales episodes, for real this time. Number 10. Tomato Sawyer and Huckleberry Larry's Big River Rescue. This one is one of them that I like to call one of the ends of the era. What do I mean by that? Well, as we can see by the credits, this one greatly involved Phil Vischer, one of the last ones to greatly involve him too. After this, we started getting dud after dud after dud, and it just became this whole big mess. Although there was St. Nicholas in there, that was good, and I kinda liked Pistachio. Beauty and the Beat had its moments. But that's aside the point. We're talking about Tomato Sawyer and Huckleberry Larry here. Based off of the popular Huck Finn book by Mark Twain, or Samuel Clemens if we want to be specific, and accurate, it follows Tomato Sawyer and Huckleberry Larry, two homesteaders that are trying to get this old childhood performer, who is now very much grown up, back to his home so he can sing with his mama. All the while, they're trying to race against the clock so that they can get back to the land before the government man shows up and declares them being run off by bears and they don't get their free land. Also trying to run away from the slave driver and these two crazy guys who believe that they're Southern royalty. And it's just a big mess. Aside from all this wackiness that it seems, it's actually a pretty well-paced episode. It's kind of laid back, it's kind of quiet, and it's got some gentle folk music. Having a lot of Southern roots in my family, I can definitely tell you the Mighty Mississippi song is something that you probably would have heard on an old record or something at some point. It's also got a lot of laughs. I feel like this one, of the later years, is the most drenched in Phil Vischer's charm. Whether it be Norm's notes, those little conversations that Bob or little Yimmy will have when Larry's not around, some of the one-off comments, or just the overall concepts. And of course it has a good lesson, which is that not helping people when you have the capacity to help them is the same thing as hurting them. It's okay to go out of your way to make sure that somebody else is better off, especially when you have the power to change it very easily. This one I think is just kind of simple, easy fun. Definitely very good, but not the best, as you can see. It's only number 10. Did you guys forget? Hope you didn't. Number 9, Esther, the girl who became queen. I know there's this big movement coming up lately about this episode not being so great, and you know what? I can kind of see where you're coming from. It's very different from all the episodes before. The tone is kind of laid back and quiet. That or they just find it boring. That's probably it. While I understand that, I personally love it. I've always really liked the story of Esther. It's basically already made to be a screenplay. And I feel like the crew from Big Idea was able to capture this perfectly. I really like the atmosphere of the whole thing. There's always something kind of foreboding going on, and the lighting definitely helps accentuate that. That and also the music, which, to my knowledge, has never really been replicated in a future episode. It's just got that distinct sound. While there certainly isn't as much humor in here as, say, Are You My Neighbor, Rack Shack and Benny, or the previously mentioned Tomato Sawyer, Huckleberry Larry, I feel it makes up for it in the story, especially surrounding that lesson, because it's true. You never have to be afraid to do what's right, especially in today's society where a lot of people are doing terrible things and they're trying to pressure you into making sure that you don't stand up and do the right thing. This lesson definitely comes in handy. Also, I really like the songs. I mean, the Lost Puppy song is decent. I really like Heyman's song, but one of my favorite songs of all time from Veggietales is The Battle Is Not Ours. According to Lisa Fisher in the behind the scenes features, a lot of the people at Big Idea kind of felt that this was their anthem in a sense. A lot of things had happened in the past and would happen in the future. All they had to do was just trust in God and everything would be fine. They never had to be afraid to do what's right, just like Esther. That, and I also think it's just sung beautifully and has really good background music. So for all those reasons, Esther is number 9. Now let's move right along to number 8, which is... pause for effect. Rack, Shack, and Benny. Pretty good for an episode that was made in a screw manufacturing plant. No, really. I'm sure we all know the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There's this evil guy, who's not a king in this version, who tries to get all of his servants to eat a certain kind of food. 3 boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, say that they won't eat it, so they don't. Then they end up getting really good physical reports and end up getting promoted. Then the crazy leader guy wants everyone to bow to a statue. They say no, they get burnt alive, except they don't get burnt alive, they get saved by an angel, and then the king turns good and turns to God. The end. Aside from changing the setting to a chocolate factory, they don't really change too much in the story. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, while dark, is definitely a bit of a simpler story. Because of that, they were able to capture pretty much all of it into this, and make it fun. That's the best way I can describe this episode. Just fun. Chase scenes are fun, the one-off lines are fun, the songs are fun. Everything about it just screams fun. Speaking of which, I kind of prefer the uncensored Bunny song to the one we ended up getting later, but still, the other one that we got later, still pretty good. I've already spoken in length about Rack Shack and Benny, and one of the very few things I'm proud of in my earlier video is what I said about this. And I think that it sticks. So, to avoid repeating myself numerous times, we'll just move right along here. Rack Shack and Benny. We've all seen it, we all know it's good, we all know the songs, we all know all about it. Definitely worth a rewatch if you haven't seen it in a while, but, to be fair, I'm pretty sure if you're watching this you've already seen this at least some point recently. It's popular for a reason, after all. Number 7, King George and the Ducky. One of the episodes where the company Big Idea was starting to get bigger and better, and, well, this definitely shows it off. Gotta say, one of the funniest. The Englishman who went up the hill and came down with all the bananas is a segment in this episode. I feel like that's all I really need to say about that. It's just a classic. The countertops are some of my favorites. Of course, I'm sure parents at the time, and maybe even kids, would have been surprised to see that it's not Bob and Larry, it's... No, wait, no, that is Bob and Larry. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that was Jimmy and Jerry for a second. Oh, it's not? Oh, wow, I'm surprised. It's one thing that it's not actually Bob and Larry, it's people pretending to be them. But I like that they went the extra mile and made sure that they knew nothing about what they were doing and had no idea. They clearly weren't prepared. Then we get to King George and the Ducky. Whoever would have thought that David and Bathsheba would have been okay for kids? Answer, this crazy guy. Apparently the original version of this was way too overt, although Bathsheba was still just a bath ducky, but with some reworks and changes, they were able to make it into this classic and much loved episode. Gotta say too, even though I knew the story of David and Bathsheba as a kid, I didn't know it was this. And apparently a few other people didn't until they got to the whole "there once was a man" bit. Speaking of that, good songs, as always, especially Endangered Love, one that I didn't really like so much as a kid, but now that I'm older and I really understand it and can appreciate it, definitely worth the rewatch. It's also got Larry in a bit of a unique role as somewhat of a villain. Actually, no, there's no somewhat about this. If you send a little kid off to war on the front lines just to get a rubber duck, you're not a somewhat villain, you're an actual villain. You're there right aside Skeletor, Prince John, and David Garcia. It's always nice to see the characters being in some kind of new roles, but still new roles that actually fit. Looking at you, Noah's Ark. With this also comes a new Bob and Larry dynamic, with Bob kind of being the escargoon to Larry's King Dedede. The lesson is handled very tactfully too, able to express it very clearly without having to pound it into your kids' heads. What's not to love about this episode? It's fun, it's funny, it's King George and the Ducky. That kinda rhymed. Number 6, Gideon Tuba Warrior. Boy did I see this one pretty late. I actually, no joke, didn't see this one until I was getting back into the show in 2015. Yes, I did see it in time for my old list, and I did really like it. But now I like it enough to where I can actually put it at my number 6 slot. Who would have guessed? Well, I did, because I'm making this list. So this starts off with the pirates who don't do anything shanghaiing this whole thing and taking over the show. Then, unlike last time, where the people who took over the show made whatever the heck this was, they actually tell a very competent and fairly moving story about George Mueller. Like the story of Esther, I've always been a big fan of the George Mueller story. And this is no exception. Similarly to what happened with the real story of St. Patrick or the real story of St. Nicholas, this isn't really a story you hear too much about, especially in Sunday school, where, of all things, you think that would really be beneficial. The orphanage owner who never asked anyone for anything and just relied on God to fulfill all of his needs. That little song they sing about his eyes are on the sparrows and all, I always just kind of feel happy and warm when I hear that. And it's got a little bit of funny bits here too, with Paul Grape being that crazy reporter. Was it for CNN? Yeah, CNN. They're just as reliable. Snap, I'm getting contemporary. After that, one of my favorite silly songs, Ukulele Karaoke with Bob, which starts off simple enough, then turns into a very, very big mess. Then there's Gideon Tuba Warrior. Again, just fun, just exciting, just funny, great songs, everything you'd come to expect in a Veggietales episode. One of the reasons this episode is so high up on the list is just because it's got everything. And in higher volumes than a lot of other episodes. It's got heart, it's got humor, it's got songs, it's got everything you need. Not to mention a fun twist on a classically retold story, the story of Gideon. There's only one thing I don't like about the episode, and that's not really the main episode itself, it's just at the end, when they advertise that movie. I've already beaten that one into the ground, like 4 times. But other than that, I really like this episode, as I have said many times before. It's a shame I didn't really see this one when I was growing up, but this was kind of at the point when I just stopped watching. Luckily, I was able to get back into the show and see this, and now I'm not missing out anymore. Number 5, Lord of the Beans, an absolute fan favorite. I wonder why. I gotta say, this episode is good on its own, but now that I've actually seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy, this has to go to the number 5 slot. So, what's the story? An extremely condensed version of Lord of the Rings. Despite the fact that this thing is only about 40 minutes and Lord of the Rings is like, what, 1,000 hours? It's still able to really poke fun at the source material and include all the most important events. Some of which, I can testify, if you don't know the story of Lord of the Rings, you're gonna have no idea what they're trying to poke fun at. Yet, it's still written in a way that's a lot of fun. You don't care if you're really missing out on the deeper parody, you're just having a good time with the wacky shenanigans. The casting in this is very well done. Obviously, you'd expect good old Junior here to be the star of the show, but also you got Mr. Nezer as Gandalf, Paul Grape as Gimli, Mr. Lunt as Gollum. That one's my personal favorite. The animation, top-notch. The setting design, of course, top-notch. Lesson, very top-notch. This is a big lesson that a lot of people really struggle with, especially a lot of Christians who don't really know what their gift is actually going to be. They know they're put on this earth for a reason, after all, that's what we're all here for, some sort of reason. But they don't really know what it is or what to use their gifts for. It's a common struggle in Christianity. I'm sure Phil Vischer felt the exact same way. And like old Toto Baggy Pants here, there's many stumbling blocks along the way to kind of tempt us into using our gifts for other, more selfish or just flat out wasteful things. In the end though, Toto does the right thing like we're all supposed to do, and it makes everything better for that. Lord of the Beans. It's every bit as great as everybody's saying it is. Number 4, Lyle the Kindly Viking. I still think this is the funniest episode. I, as a fan of Shakespeare, Gilbert and Sullivan, and all that kind of stuff, I am a sucker for what this tries to do. And I think it succeeds. There's not a groaner joke in here. Even that I need to go to the bathroom joke where Larry constantly singing and screaming, I still find it very funny. There's something about the timing here and how elegant this whole thing tries to be, while even the episode itself knows this whole thing is just stupid. But it has fun in being stupid. The omelet part especially gets me every time. Especially because the theater department at my school was pretty much just like this, so I can kind of relate in a way. Hi, Soul Cat. Still my favorite silly song. Can't beat it. Now the Kindly Viking. Well, not as funny as Omelette, after all, Omelette was just kind of made to be funny. I think this handles the lesson very well, has some good dramatic theming, and again, very funny. I don't know what it is, but the part where they're trying to spy on Lyle and they're worried about getting too close / too far, that kills me every time. And yeah, let's talk about that lesson that I mentioned just a little bit ago, sharing. Can you think of a more juvenile, easy lesson? Still, this teaches it very well. Saying that sharing may give you less stuff, but it gives you more friends, or that the things God wants us to do for others usually makes us feel good too. And is it just me, or does High Soul Cat have a subtle theme of sharing going on in there? I don't know. That's just a theory of
no.
As I and many people before me have said, this thing is just plain fun, fun, fun. Check it out if you don't believe me. Although, once again, I'm sure you've already seen it. Number 3, A Snoodle's Tale. Another criminally underrated episode. This one takes place right after Little Joe. Sort of, if you don't count Autotainment or a few others in the middle. Larry returns from Danish immersions camp, only, whoops, no he didn't. Due to some sort of convoluted accident, he accidentally went to Overdone British Literary Adaptations Camp. Because of this, we get, instead of this story about a trucker and his little monkey, we get Dr. Jiggle and Mr. Sly, based off a book that really shouldn't be read to kids. At all. Well, nothing fantastic. This one is certainly charming and pretty endearing. We get Sports Utility Vehicle. I know a lot of people love this one, and I think it's good. It's not my number 1 favorite, but still good. So if I'm just speaking moderately well of this episode, why is it number 3? That's where we get to the Snoodle's Tale segment itself. The best part about this, which there's a lot of good things like the Dr. Seuss aspect, the rhyming, the writing, all of this, it's the lesson and the way it's carried out. This is one of the most important lessons I feel that Veggietales has ever covered, and they did it in such a fantastic, heartwarming way. I'm not kidding, at the end, I always get the chills. Because I found this one when I was rewatching the show and I was not in a great place. I wasn't really caring about myself, I was feeling kind of down all the time. But I saw this and it kind of cheered me up. And it did every other time I watched it when I felt down. Just the way that they talk in this about the lesson and the choice of words and the metaphors they use, everything just flows perfectly into place and makes it one of my favorite parts in any episode ever. That alone makes this thing special. But the lesson that's carried out, not just through this, but also through Dr. Jiggle, really, really needs to be taught. Because we live in a society where they try to paint certain body images or certain personality types as far more desirable than others. And by far more desirable, I mean desirable at all. If you're a certain type in body, or if you're a certain type in personality, some will just view you worthless. But the important thing to remember is that it's not what they think, it's what God thinks. Sadly, a lot of people seem to forget that. But not Phil Vischer, not Mike Naraki, and not anyone who watches A Snoodle's Tale. Number 2, it's a tie! The Star of Christmas and An Easter Carol. Honestly, 2 of the most cinematic episodes ever. Even more than some of the movies. Well, one of them. I think you know which one. This one. This is another one, or I guess 2, where everything is just perfect. The writing is perfect, the setting is perfect, the music is perfect, everything just turns out perfect. It's nothing but fun the whole way through. And not only is it fun and funny, again, poignant. Very poignant. Talking about 2 over-commercialized and often forgotten in some of the spiritual sense, holidays. After all, Christmas is more seen as some kind of give me holiday, and Easter, what's the whole point of Easter again? Obviously, these are all very easy lessons to try to teach, and in fact, Veggietales even tried to do the same thing with the Toy That Saved Christmas way early on. But I think this one kinda nails it better. Star of Christmas has a bit more layers than Toy That Saved Christmas. It's got far more interesting characters, it's got a bit of a nicer tone, the songs are better. The animation is certainly improved no matter which version of Toy That Saved Christmas you watch. Overall, it's just charming, it's fun, and I kind of have the same notes for this one. Again, everything flows so well. The only difference here is that obviously the tone is quite a bit darker, which is very much appreciated. I think it's really paid off here. That and the guest star, very well done. Every so often, Hope will get kind of a weird, wonky line when it comes to delivery, but for the most part, everything flows very well. What can I say about these two classics that I haven't said before? Or that anyone else hasn't said before? Nothing. Okay, so moving on to the next one, which is the one, the number one. What is the episode, above all other episodes and movies, that I consider the number one? Well, before we get to that, here are a few honorable mentions. Larry Boy and the Fib from Outer Space. Mo and the Big Exit. Josh and the Big Wall. Are You My Neighbor? And Minnesota Cuke in the Search for Samson's Hairbrush. Now, the number one episode, in my eyes, is Kid Fusion. This is one of the most amazing, I don't even want to say VeggieTales episodes, just pieces of art in general. The lesson is fantastic. The character portrayal is spot on, and the editing, oh, bravo. The people behind this are so talented that they don't even need to edit out their mistakes. Take a look.
I don't think that's such a good idea.
Oh, it'll be a great idea.
So, I think what we should do here is count to 3, and all the kindergartners and first graders can scream as loud as they can. How's that sound to you, Harry?
Sounds great.
Oh, just brilliant. And this one is daring. I never thought I would ever see a kid's show that would teach the lesson of boiling Swedes in hot oil. But you know what? They went there. They knew that this was a lesson that had to be taught. Oh yeah, okay. I think a lot of you caught on to this. This isn't a real thing. I made a funny there. The real number one episode is The Ballad of Little Joe. Over these years, I've been thinking and thinking some more, mostly about why I didn't put this anywhere on my top 10 list. If I could carve out a spot for It's a Meaningful Life, an episode I don't even like anymore, then surely I could have done one for this that I always liked. It's another one of those perfect ones, but it goes on more than just that. More than just all the other things that I've already talked about what makes an episode perfect. For one, the setting, it's great. They tell the story of Joseph pretty much unchanged, except for they make it a Western, which is a very unique take on it, harkening back to a lot of those days of Rack Shack and Benny or Are You My Neighbor, where they tell Bible stories but put them in unique scenarios and situations, ultimately helping them stand out, aside from the fact that they're played by vegetables. And I think this is one of the tightest written episodes ever. There's no clunky moments. Everything feels natural, everything feels earned, everything feels right. Even the lesson, it's very appropriately taught, and boy howdy is it handled very well. Because when you get down to it, Joseph had a really rough time. But he still persevered and still trusted God. And you know what? They don't shy away from any of that except maybe lightening up on Potiphar's wife. We see the torment, we see the despair, we see everything go through little Joe here. And that ending moment where all the boys are wanting to sacrifice themselves to save Benjamin, that along with the ending of A Snoodle's Tale is one of my absolute favorite parts in any VeggieTales episode ever. The way it's shot, the way it's just kind of quiet, the dialogue choices, and especially the delivery, it always just kind of gets me right there. This one is one of the few that I can't think of any negatives for. And trust me, I've tried to see if there's anything I can't find right about this. This is just one of those perfect episodes, and it's one that I can just watch over and 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 over again, and not get tired of. The Ballad of Little Joe, my pick for the number one VeggieTales episode of all time. So what are your favorites? Comment below, let me know, I want to hear about it. Do you guys agree, disagree? What are some points? Let's have a fun discussion in the comments. But let's try to keep it civil, okay? Now tune in next week for a very special video where we delve a bit more in depth into a certain thing and the Alright, I will see you guys next week.
Good night, everybody.